The oath says, "First, do no harm." He said it, probably more than once. And then he sat across from frightened people, looked them in the eyes, and used their fear like a tool. That is not medicine. That is predation. Wearing a white coat. Every case has a story. Every clue has a meaning. And joining me in the studio today is true crime investigator Morris John, whose perspective and expertise help uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface. Morris, welcome.
Thank you, it's great to be here. Behind every case, there's a timeline, a motive, and often a missing piece that people fail to notice. Sometimes uncovering that missing piece changes everything.
Absolutely. Today, we're examining a case that left investigators and the public searching for answers. At first glance, it seemed straightforward, but as events unfolded, the story took a very different turn. Morris, when you first looked at this case, what stood out to you?
At first, this looked like a respected doctor helping desperate people battle cancer. But as investigators dug deeper, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Patients who believed they were fighting a deadly disease may never have needed that fight at all. And behind the white coat and medical credentials, investigators would eventually uncover one of the most shocking healthcare fraud cases in America.
And Morris, that's where this story takes a chilling turn. Because for many of these patients, the person they trusted to save their lives may have been the very person putting them in harm's way.
Exactly. And what makes this case especially disturbing is that it didn't begin with flashing warning signs or dramatic accusations. On the surface, Dr. Farid Fata appeared successful, respected, trusted by his patients and the community around him. People walked into his office believing they were meeting a doctor who would help them fight for their lives. But as time passed, investigators and whistleblowers began noticing something that didn't seem right. And what they uncovered would expose a pattern few people could have imagined. To understand how it all unfolded, we have to go back to the beginning. He sat across from them, in a white coat, calm hands, warm eyes, and he told them they were dying. Some cried right there in that chair, others called their children from the parking lot, couldn't drive home, just sat there, rewrote their wills, sold their homes, said goodbye to people who were still alive, and every single one of them believed him, because why wouldn't they? He had the degrees, the clinics, the reputation. He had trained at one of the most prestigious cancer centers in the world, but here is what investigators would later uncover. Some of those patients didn't have cancer, not the kind he described, not the kind that needed treatment. Some of them weren't sick at all. Tonight, through the shadow lens, we examine the darkest crimes and the secrets hidden behind them. This is the story of Dr. Farid Fata, a man who understood something deeply terrifying about human beings. Fear makes people obedient, and obedience in medicine can be harvested. Picture the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, early 2000s, quiet neighborhoods, morning coffee, the kind of place where people wave at neighbors, where you trust the doctor your doctor recommends. Farid Fata arrived in America from Lebanon in the early 1990s. He was trained, ambitious, and extraordinarily well-credentialed. He served his fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, one of the most respected cancer institutions in the world. He carried that name everywhere, and patients felt it. This man trained where the best trained. By 2003, he opened his own practice, Michigan Hematology Oncology, Rochester Hills, Michigan, and over the next decade it grew, 7 locations, across 7 cities, his own in-house pharmacy, his own diagnostic testing center, his own radiation facility. At its peak, Fata's practice was treating 17,000 patients. He became the state's largest private cancer practice, and patients described him the same way, over and over, calm, thoughtful, the kind of doctor who looked at you and made you feel like you mattered. He even ran a cancer charity. He called it Swan for Life, a foundation offering support to patients and families fighting cancer. A man who built his empire on healing, a man who gave to cancer victims. Remember that detail. Because later it becomes something very different, but there were moments, small ones, that didn't quite fit. Patients arriving for routine follow-ups, leaving with aggressive treatment plans, diagnoses that felt heavier than expected, and something else, something that investigators would later call deliberate. Fata saw 50 to 60 patients per day. He handed most of them off to unlicensed physicians for the bulk of their appointment. then spent 5, maybe 10 minutes with them himself. 8-minute appointments for cancer patients, and yet those same patients described him as attentive, dedicated, compassionate, because in those 8 minutes he was very, very good. Here is what we know about fear. It narrows everything. The future disappears. The present moment becomes the only moment. And when someone with authority, with credentials, with calm, with a name like Sloan Kettering behind him, tells you that you are sick, you don't stop to audit the paperwork. You stop breathing. And then you do whatever they say. That's not weakness, that's human. And Farid Fata knew exactly how human his patients were. Here is what makes this case different from ordinary fraud. Chemotherapy is not a pill you swallow at home. It is hours in a chair, a needle in your arm, controlled poison moving through your body, hair falls out. You cannot keep food down, your bones ache, your immune system collapses, some patients lose their teeth. And every single person enduring that believed they were fighting for their life. Some of them weren't fighting anything, they were just suffering. So how did no one question it? Because Fata had an answer for everything. When patients or colleagues noticed his treatments were more aggressive than usual, more frequent, higher doses, longer sessions than standard protocol, Fata had a name for it. He called it the European protocol. He told patients this was a superior method, a more advanced approach, the kind of treatment reserved for those who wanted the best. And patients believed him, because why wouldn't they? He trained at Sloan Kettering. He knew things their family doctor didn't, but the European protocol wasn't a real protocol. It was a justification, built to make exploitation sound like excellence. And here is where the financial layer comes into focus, because Fata hadn't just built a medical empire, he had built an economic machine, his own pharmacy, Vital Pharmacia, his own diagnostic center, United Diagnostics, his own radiation facility, Michigan Radiation Institute. Every test, every scan, every infusion, billed through companies he owned, paid back to himself. And by the time investigators got access to the numbers, scale was staggering. His practice was purchasing $45 million worth of chemotherapy drug every year, the national median for a full-time oncologist, between 1.5 and 1.9 million. He was buying 25 times the normal amount, not because his patients needed it, because the billing system rewarded him for using it. Before we go further, I want you to sit with something, because it's easy to look at this story and see one villain, one man, one broken mind. But there were warning signs, early ones, and the question that investigators and victims kept asking was this: how did no one stop it sooner? Because someone did try. In early 2010, a woman named Angela Swantek went to one of Fata's clinics, not as a patient, as a job applicant. She was an oncology nurse. 19 years of experience. She knew what good cancer care looked like, and what she saw that day disturbed her immediately. Patients in infusion chairs receiving medications through slow drips, drugs that should have been delivered in quick IV injections, treatments like Neulasta, a powerful human growth factor, being given immediately after chemotherapy instead of the recommended 24 hours later. She asked a nurse on staff why. The answer she received was 4 words: "That's just the way we do things here." Swantek declined the job, and then she did the right thing. She reported her concerns to Michigan's Bureau of Health Professions. She waited. A year later, she received a response. The state had investigated and found nothing out of compliance. Swantek would later say she was never contacted during that investigation, never spoken to, never asked a single question. The warning was filed and buried. Patients continued walking through those doors for 3 more years, but Swantek wasn't the first. As far back as 2007, a patient named Maggie Dorsey had sued Fata for malpractice. She had been diagnosed with cancer in 2004. 7 months of chemotherapy had made it difficult for her to walk. Then she learned she didn't have cancer. The case was settled out of court. In 2009, quietly, no public record, no licensing board action, no warning to future patients. By 2010, Fata was still seeing 17,000 patients. Still the most respected oncologist in the Detroit area, still running his Swan for Life cancer charity. I want to stop here, because it is very easy to discuss this case in numbers, in charges, in court documents. But there were people in those chairs, real people. Robert Sobiere, a disabled auto worker from Michigan. In 2010, Fata diagnosed him with a rare blood cancer. For years, Sobiere endured monthly chemotherapy infusions, 3 weeks of radiation. The treatments made his teeth fall out. His body twitched uncontrollably. After Fata's arrest, he went to a different doctor. He had never had cancer. Patty Hester, told she had a terminal blood disorder called MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome, told she was dying. Her husband Mike watched her give away her belongings, keepsakes, for people to remember her by. He fell into depression, took up smoking, took up drinking. They rushed to Disney World to make final memories. She didn't have MDS, she never had it. And Monica Flagg, 51 years old. In 2013, Fata diagnosed her with multiple myeloma. He told her she would need a lifetime maintenance dose of chemotherapy. She believed him because he was calm, because he looked at her like she mattered, because that's what he did. On July 1, 2013, the same day as her very first chemotherapy session, Monica Flagg tripped over a suitcase in her bedroom and broke her leg in 2 places. She was rushed to the hospital. Fata was on vacation in Lebanon, and that accident would change everything, because the doctor covering Fata's patients that 4th of July weekend was a man named Dr. So Mongley, a Burmese-born oncologist, newly settled in Michigan, soft-spoken, meticulous. He walked into Monica Flagg's hospital room on rounds, picked up her chart, and stopped. He could tell just by looking at the numbers that nothing was consistent with an active cancer patient. He reviewed her records, went back through everything. There was nothing, no medical basis, not for the diagnosis, not for the chemotherapy. He asked the visitor in Flagg's room to step outside, closed the door, and told her, "You don't have cancer. You are 51 years old, you're healthy, don't ever go back to Dr. Fata." Monica Flagg later said she had sensed something was wrong from the moment Mongley walked in. "This doctor was in my hospital room today, and even though he didn't say it, I don't think he thinks I have cancer." She was right, and what Mongley did next would bring down the entire empire. Dr. Mongley wasn't alone. Around the same time, George Carradshea, the office manager at Fata's Crittenton Cancer Center location, was watching something troubling. Doctors and nurses were leaving, one after another. When Carradshea pressed a departing oncologist for answers, the doctor told him plainly, Fata was administering chemotherapy to patients who didn't need it. Carradshea thought about that, and then he contacted the United States Department of Justice. He was interviewed on August 2, 2013. 4 days later, in the morning of August 6, FBI agents arrived at the Crittenton Cancer Center, and Farid Fata was arrested. When federal investigators began opening the files, the scale of what they found was almost incomprehensible. From August 2007 to July 2013, Fata had submitted approximately $225 million in claims to Medicare. Of that, $109 million was for chemotherapy and cancer treatments. And the victims, 553 people, 553, told they were sick, or told their cancer had returned, or kept on treatment long after it stopped being medically justified. Including terminal patients, people who were genuinely dying, kept on chemotherapy in their final days, robbed of their last chance to make peace with death. And one patient, one individual, who according to court testimony received 468 chemotherapy treatments over 6 years, 468. The sentencing hearing began on July 3, 2015. It ran for an entire week. 150 former patients and family members filed victim impact statements. 25 were given 10 minutes each to testify. For 7 days they stood at that podium, and Farid Fata sat at the defense table, writing on a notepad, flipping through papers, barely looking up, until one woman walked to the podium. Her name was Laura Stedgefeld. Her father, Piero Zanotti, had died in 2014 after years of Fata's treatment. She looked directly at him, and she said, "Farid Fata, I hate you. You are repulsive, you disgust me, you are a monster, you are evil. Clearly you are a coward because you can't even look at me right now. You murdered my dad. You poisoned, tortured, and murdered my dad." He didn't look up, not once. But when it was finally his turn to speak, when the judge asked if he had anything to say, Farid Fata wept. He said, "I misused my talents because of power and greed. My quest for power is self-destructive. I am horribly ashamed." He cried through every word. The same man who sat expressionless through 7 days of his victim's pain found his tears when it was time to discuss his own. While investigators were building their case, they began examining the financial trail more closely, and what they found completed the portrait. His Swan for Life cancer charity, the foundation he built to support cancer patients and their families, had been used by hospice companies to channel kickback payments back to him. He was receiving payments for referring his patients to specific hospices, funneled through a charity named after the people he was exploiting. And in an email exchange with his financial advisor, dating from August 2010, the same year the nurse reported him to state authorities, Fata wrote about a property in Lebanon. His father had a great deal, he said, a fully furnished chateau in Adma, Lebanon, $3 million, while his patients were draining retirement accounts, selling homes, preparing for deaths that were never coming. He was shopping for a castle. And his wife, Samar Fata, who served as CEO and CFO of his medical companies, who ran the financial side of his entire operation, fled to Lebanon with their children the day his arrest became public. Authorities believed she was a party to the fraud. They could not find sufficient grounds to charge her. She was never prosecuted. They have since divorced. She is free. On July 10, 2015, Judge Paul Borman addressed the court. He said Fata had not practiced oncology. He had practiced greed, shutting down whatever compassion he had. US Attorney Barbara McQuade called Fata the most egregious fraudster in the history of this country, and she made a comparison. She said he was worse than Bernie Madoff, because Madoff destroyed his victims' bank accounts. Fata destroyed their bank accounts and their bodies. The sentence handed down, 45 years in federal prison, one of the longest sentences ever given in a healthcare fraud case in American history. Fata was ordered to forfeit $17.6 million in assets, restitution, to be paid to his victims and their families. As of May 2026, Farid Fata is 60 years old. He is incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Williamsburg, South Carolina, a low-security facility. There is no parole available for federal convictions of this kind. His projected release date is November 16, 2050. He will be 85 years old. He has tried repeatedly to leave early. In 2020, he sought compassionate release, citing type 2 diabetes, mild cognitive impairment, and COVID-19 risks. Denied. In 2024, he filed again, claiming a dangerous immunodeficiency, arguing that prison was failing to provide him adequate medical care. He told the court, "I'll die if I don't get out." On March 26, 2025, the court denied that motion as well. The judge noted that his years-long extensive criminal conduct was undeniably dreadful to behold, and that he continued to pose a danger to the community. He will almost certainly die in that prison, serving a sentence for what he did to people who came to him afraid, and left even more broken. There is a concept in psychology called authority bias. It describes our tendency to trust people with perceived expertise. Doctors, judges, specialists. People who hold symbols of credibility. It's not irrational. Most of the time it serves us. We cannot rerun every test, verify every credential. We extend trust because civilization requires it. But authority bias has a shadow side. It means the most dangerous manipulators are the ones who understand how it works. Fata didn't break into anyone's home. He didn't threaten anyone. He positioned himself as the authority in the room and waited for fear to do the rest. And here is what I keep returning to about this case. The patients who suffered were not naive, they were not careless, they were scared, or they loved someone who was scared, and they did exactly what every public health message tells you to do. They saw a specialist, they trusted the diagnosis, they followed the treatment plan, and they were destroyed for it. What this case forces us to ask is not just who Farid Fata was, but what made him possible. A nurse reported him in 2010. The state cleared him without contacting her. A malpractice case was settled quietly in 2009. Buried, colleagues noticed, and mostly stayed silent because he was profitable. It took two people to bring him down, Dr. Somongle, George Karadsheh, both of whom in separate moments chose not to look away. The US attorney publicly thanked them both, calling what they uncovered the most serious fraud case in the history of this country. It's comforting to believe this ended. One arrest, one conviction, one man, but stories like this leave something behind, not loud, quiet, the kind of doubt that arrives during an appointment, during a moment when someone in a white coat says, "We found something," and you sit very still, and the room gets smaller, and you think, "I trust this person." Just like 553 people trusted Farid Fata, his wife is in Lebanon, never charged. The state that ignored the 2010 warning never faced accountability, and Fata himself sits in a low-security prison in South Carolina, 60 years old, filing motions, arguing that he deserves medical compassion.
Morris, at best, this story is a dark reality of man's inhumanity to man. The Farid Fata case was more than a story of medical fraud. It was a story of trust broken at the deepest level. Patients walked into his office carrying fear, hope, and the belief that the person in front of them was there to heal them. Instead, investigators uncovered allegations of unnecessary treatments and lives profoundly affected by decisions made behind closed doors. This case became a reminder that some of the most devastating betrayals do not always come from strangers. Sometimes they come from the very people entrusted with our care. Justice may close a courtroom case, but for many families, the impact of what happened never truly disappears. Through the shadow lens, we examine the darkest crimes and the secrets hidden behind them. And sometimes, the darkest secret of all is how ordinary the conditions were that made the crime possible. How unremarkable a waiting room can look. How reassuring a calm voice sounds. How completely fear can close off the part of your mind that might have asked one more question. Cases like this remind us that deception does not always arrive wearing a mask. Sometimes it arrives in a white coat, with warm eyes, and your name already on the chart. Before you go, I want to tell you about the next case we're examining through the shadow lens. It begins not with a doctor, but with a small town, a missing woman, and a husband who cooperated with investigators from the very first phone call, answered every question, passed every test, was present at every vigil, stood at his wife's memorial and wept. Investigators called his behavior textbook, almost too textbook. That case is coming next, and I'll tell you now it does not end where you think it ends. Before the video ends, I want to ask you something. If a specialist told you today that you had a serious illness, what would you do? Would you seek a second opinion, or would fear make that feel impossible? Leave your answer below, because the psychology of this case lives in that question, and I read every single comment. Thank you for joining us. If this case left you with questions or thoughts, share them below. Until next time, stay informed, stay aware, and remember that every case has a story beneath the surface.